Okay, good stuff. Right. So to get started, by way of a bit of background, a bit of context for you, content marketing today has been around for quite a long time. Some blogs are, 10 years old. Some of the early adopters, companies like HubSpot or Close or Gong. Many more blogs have been around for 5+ years. And there are even some blogs that in just the span of a year or two have racked up hundreds and hundreds of posts published to their blog. Because that is fundamentally our job as content marketers, to publish as much content as possible. We are here to generate traffic, to generate leads and conversions, and generate revenue. And as a result, most of the processes we have, most of our focus goes into content creation. But today, to this backdrop of content marketing being really old, of all these companies having all these blog posts, content maintenance is just as important. So case in point, if you spend a year churning out content, you're going to very quickly realize that your blog is not the lithe, malleable, easy to interact with thing it once was. It becomes big, it becomes clunky, it becomes hard to work out what you've even published in the past few months, let alone the past few years. So I'm talking blog posts that have lost a bunch of the traffic they used to have, old articles that are off-brand or outdated or just don't reflect your current way of thinking, half-finished hubs and spokes, broken links, content that is just off on its own, doing who knows what, not connected to any other part of your site. And fundamentally, articles that in some cases just do not do the thing you hoped they would do. And if you find yourself in that situation, you are not alone. We regularly work with lots and lots of customers in that exact situation. We come in, we help them fix these problems with the goal of generating more revenue from content they've published years and months past. That's a pretty good deal. You've already paid for it. Why not get as much benefit out of it as possible? And the process we use to do that is content auditing. We just relaunched our content auditing service so we can help companies do this if they are stuck with it. But more importantly, today, for you lovely folks, we are going to talk through the principles, the processes, the frameworks that go into how we think about content auditing, with a view to you being able to leave here at the end of this session and apply some of these principles to your content to unlock the growth opportunities that are hidden away in your existing content. Now, when I say we do this with our customers, I actually mean Andrew and Whitney do this with our customers. So I will let them introduce themselves and hand over to them so we can get on with the presentation. Andrew and Whitney.
Cool. Thanks very much, Ryan. Yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm head of R&D at Animalz, and I've been building out the content auditing service over the last few months. I was one of the original people at Animalz back in 2015, so I have seen it all at every single stage. I've been a writer, I've been an editor, I've been a strategist, I've been a GM, seen all types of companies, all types of blogs at all types of levels. Now moving more into like the data side of things. I used to be a neuroscientist before I got into content marketing. So, this is an area that I love to be involved in.
I'm Whitney. I'm a content strategist at Animalz. I work with about a dozen customers ranging from really well-known SaaS companies to early stage startups. I team up with Andrew when we do audits for Animalz customers, and really my role is kind of lending the more strategic perspective to our audits. So taking an organization's like content data, enriching it with user resource research, looking at what our competitors are doing, what challenges stand in our way, and what opportunities we can leverage to better hit customer goals. So very excited to be talking with you all.
And Andrew and Whitney have very kindly put together some slides that they're going to talk through. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get to the good stuff immediately. All right, Andrew and Whitney, over to you.
Sweet. So if you can go to the first slide. Cool. So, when we're thinking about content audits, we're really thinking about the idea of answering the question, is, the content strategy you're working on actually working for you? as Ryan was talking about in the intro, like it's just super, super easy to get stuck in the weeds with content, especially if you're a small team. You know, you might be just one single person working on every single level of content. And, you know, you're writing, publishing, promoting, next week, writing, publishing, promoting, like on and on and on. And, you know, you look up and, you know, a year's gone by, 2 years have gone by, you've put a lot of stuff into the world, but you have no real understanding of how it's performed. If you're publishing the right stuff for your audience, whether you're building kind of like technical and like content debt on your blog, or if, you know, the opposite, where you're kind of like, we talk sometimes about like blog equity, where you're, you know, you're investing in your blog and you're seeing that investment compound and grow over time as you want. And it's kind of like releasing revenue. You know, you published something a year ago that's still working for you today. So that's kind of like where we, you know, the very, very high level, how we think about content audits, just making sure that strategy is working. Can you go back to the slides, Ryan?
You're sharing the slides, Ryan.
Yeah, I totally forgot I was screen sharing there. We'll just pretend that didn't happen.
So with content audits, we think about them at multiple levels because a content operation works at multiple levels. It works from single articles, you know, the stuff you're actually putting out there every week, all the way through to how your company works and talks together and shares knowledge. And we, you know, a content audit is about what works now, what can be optimized better to work in the future, and also, you know, what might it be good to move away from as well. You know, you don't have to have everything on there all the time. And, you know, especially kind of like having, you know, sometimes a second pair of eyes on stuff, it's like, what are you missing? You know, you know, while you've been in the weeds so far, like what has, you know, gone by that you haven't been able to think about. So, like I say, we think about this on multiple levels, and we're going to go through each of those today. You know, each of these growth levers that you can work on, and each one has like growth opportunities within it. But it's kind of like this, you know, systemic idea where all of these things together are actually what you want to think about. You know, they do work individually, but really it's about working together at each of these different levels. So from my perspective, when I work on content audits, I think about, you know, the first two on this, like page level and technical level. So at the page level, we're thinking about like the metrics, you know, like how much traffic, what keywords are doing, you know, like the on-page words and content and how that's working or not. And then at the technical level, we're thinking about what's working with the site in particular, what's not, and, you know, is there anything on the site in particular that might be causing you problems? So I do that part, and then Whitney concentrates on the higher level stuff.
Right. Yeah. So when you think about auditing from a strategic level, you're asking yourself, why am I creating content to begin with? What impact do I want content to have on my business? And then you're also looking at whether you're using the best type of content and the best tactics to actually reach those goals. From an operational level, you're determining whether you actually have the resources within your organization to execute on the content that you need. You're also looking at untapped resources that maybe you have hidden within your organization. And like Andrew said, we're going to go into details for each of these as we move along.
So something that comes up sometimes is this idea of like SEO versus content audits. And I think it's kind of like important to think about the difference between the two and why we call these content audits rather than SEO audits, even though SEO is an important component of what we do. So the way we see it is like SEO audits are highly data focused. You know, they are looking for these technical issues and they're thinking about content from a very kind of like keyword first way of thinking. And Animalz, we incorporate that into the strategies we build out, but we don't necessarily think like just a straight list of keywords in a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet is like the best way to generate content. In particular, because content strategies involve more than just SEO focused content. You have thought leadership, you have sales enablement, you have stuff which is there just for a few people, but you want it to be highly converting. And also SEO audits kind of like miss out on the quality perspective as well. They are super good for if you've got highly technical issues on your site, you know, you need like real kind of like developers to look at your site, and there might be issues there. Or kind of like the way I think about SEO audits a lot of the time is like they're super good for like e-commerce sites or sites which have like thousands and thousands and thousands of product pages, which kind of like auto-generated, have to rank for short tail keywords, but don't necessarily have content in the way that, you know, Animalz thinks about content marketing.
Yeah. And really, your content audit should examine the entirety of your content ecosystem. So you do want to look at your blog for sure, but also your website, all of your product or landing pages. And if you have them, your video channels, social media, podcast, you name it, basically. All of these things really work in tandem to move you towards your goals. So for example, if your goal is to drive conversions, you need to look at all of the pieces of content that currently help you create a conversion. So for most companies, that's not, most of your folks aren't going to be just looking at one blog post or one page on your website and boo, converting. You'll have folks who will land on a blog article and then leave. And then maybe longer down the road, they'll interact with a LinkedIn post, sign up for a webinar, and there you go. Others will interact with like 10 different pages on your website before submitting a demo request. So if you're only auditing your blog, you're missing out on all of those other elements that come into it. The other thing to keep in mind too is that your audit should go beyond just looking at data. You can have a piece of content that's doing well from a quantitative perspective, but it could actually also be doing like nothing for you as far as your goals are concerned. So for example, say you have a piece of content that's ranking for a bunch of keywords, which is awesome, great indicator, but now we need to look at that content a little bit more closely. So is it ranking for the right keywords? Is it bringing in the right kind of traffic? Does it provide enough value for your audience, or are you serving up a bad experience? Are people looking at this content and being like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that brand. They're not providing me any value. Does it properly represent your brand? And then is it also introducing the audience to your product or your service as a potential solution? The data can tell you what's happening with your content, but it's up to us to like gut check what the data is telling us, and then also pull in some of these more qualitative insights to help us better understand like the why behind what the content is doing. There you go. No.
There we go. I was just going to say that qualitative aspect, that gut check is so important as well, because you can have plenty of pages on your site that perform well from an SEO perspective. But when you're reading through them, when you're using your human intuition, they're just bad pages or bad articles. They're not interesting. They're not compelling. They're the kind of content that even if it were to rank well, even if people were to find it and click through it, it's not good enough. It doesn't aspire to the standards you aspire to. And that kind of qualitative thing is very important, but it doesn't get reflected if you just use a performance spreadsheet, something like that with just SEO focused data points.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So when should you consider doing an audit? I'm a fan of the mentality of like, when in doubt, do an audit. I realize that's not realistic for most folks. I do think that there are times when an audit is absolutely necessary. That's usually right before like a big project, you're seeing a change in your status quo, or you're struggling to meet your goals. So in terms of starting a big project, this could be something like migrating a bunch of content over from a different site. It could be launching a new content arm like an academy. We actually helped one customer do both of those things in one audit. They were looking to migrate their blog into this new academy that completely changed the way that they were structuring their content. And we found that the audit was really important because they already had hundreds and hundreds of articles on their existing blog. And what we needed to know before doing anything was what role that existing content was going to play in this new academy. We didn't want that company's content, whether it was on the academy or the blog, competing with itself. And we also didn't want to be dragged down by any super outdated or low quality content that was just kind of out there from years and years ago. So we went through all of those articles and we analyzed their performance based on the company's goals. And for each one, we decided whether to retire it, refresh it, or retain it as is. And in doing so, we actually eliminated quite a lot of duplicate content that was already impacting that company's search rankings. We also helped them refresh some of that content to make it more valuable to their readers and build a better representation of that company's brand. And then we created an entire brand spanking new academy with a bunch of this repurposed content, so they weren't starting everything from scratch. So it ended up saving them a bunch of time. You also need an audit anytime you make big changes in your content strategy. So this is applicable if you're competing in a new space, maybe you're targeting a new audience. We had another customer come to us after deciding to completely change their target audience from publishers, in this case, to app developers. And the problem they had was that they had spent all this time kind of focusing on this one audience. All of their blog content was written for app publishers. And so they had absolutely nothing for app developers, and they really didn't know where to even begin with them. So with this audit, we did a lot of user research. We looked at what app developers were looking for in terms of content, what their challenges are, how best to reach them. And we also proposed ways that they could repurpose that existing content that was focusing for publishers for this new audience. So let's see. Audits are also super clutch for when your team is having problems. That could be missing your goals, or maybe you're starting to make progress on your goals, but it's not happening fast enough. They're also really good for teams who've been publishing content and never really had a strategy in place to begin with. So in this scenario, even if you've really never had a method to your madness, pretty sure there's still a bunch of insights that you can glean from what you've thrown out into the world. If you can use an audit to find out what those insights are, you can hit the ground running with your new strategy.
Yeah,
that lack of
no, go ahead, Ryan.
Cool. I was going to say that lack of strategy as well is surprisingly common, actually. Quite often you'll have maybe a member of your leadership team who's really, really, really bullish on content and just knows that it's a channel they want to explore. And if you just raised a round of funding, maybe you can throw a bunch of money at it. Generally, if you publish some stuff, you will see some results, and it can look like it's doing a good job in the beginning. It's just later on, months, a year down the line, when you start to realize that actually that was a bit of a fluke. It's hard to compound on that traffic. You're losing those gains very quickly. And at that point, the best thing to do is just say, right, let's take stock of this, work out what's working, what isn't, and a content audit is the perfect thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was just going to say, all of this stuff is, it's related to this idea of, we used to say writing is an art, but content is an acquisition channel, right? Everything here is tied to revenue. When you look at when do you need an audit, these tactical or strategic decisions, it's about tying stuff to revenue. You're making business decisions and you need to change, and in some way that's going to impact what you're doing with your content. So I think that's something super important to think about.
All right. So when you do your audit, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out your goals. There are 3 goals you need to establish before you do anything else. You've got your business goals, your content goals, and then finally your audit goals. So we start with business goals because ultimately you need your content to support your business. A business goal will look something like increase annual revenue by $10 million. Usually this is something that's set by the heads of state in your company, and the entire company is actually rallying around this goal. So once you have your business goal, you can create a content goal that directly maps back to what your business needs. So to do that, you can take your business goal and then be as specific as possible about what your content needs to do in order to support that business goal. So the caveat here is that if you know nothing about how your content is performing, your content goal isn't going to be that specific yet. It's going to be pretty high level because you just don't have the information that you need at that point. That's what an audit can help you with. So an example of a high level content goal in this scenario might be something like drive 20% of that revenue goal with your content. And as your audit comes together, you can have, and you get more visibility into what's actually happening with your content, then your content goal will become way more specific. So say you're doing your audit and you're realizing that you have a solid conversion rate, but you're not bringing in enough traffic to really support that revenue goal. And in that scenario, you can adapt your content goal to something more along the lines of like, drive this new revenue by generating 100,000 new website visitors or however many. Then once you have your business goal and your content goal, you have the context you need in order to create an audit goal. Now, the reason we set audit goals is to really focus your attention. So when you start an audit, it's really, really easy to just start collecting as much data as possible. That can actually draw out the process. It can just take up your resources and stand in the way of you actually getting the information that you need to execute on your goals with your audit. So if you know that you need to drive such and such amount of revenue, and you know that traffic is really the thing that's standing in your way, your audit goal is going to focus you in on finding opportunities to increase that traffic. So you can spend your time identifying what your top performing content is, learning from it, and then coming up with tactics that will help you drive that traffic needle. So this right here is a really simple example. It doesn't dig into like how conversions move into your pipeline and then how they become customers, or how much impact a customer is going to have on your revenue. Setting goals can be quite complicated, but the more that you can quantify exactly what you need to get from your content, the better argument you're going to have when you're talking to stakeholders about the performance and the ROI of your content.
Cool. So yeah, when Whitney and I work on these together, you know, we divvy up the work, and Whitney's looking at the strategic stuff and I'm looking at more of the data analysis part of it. And this is basically where I start. I start at the page level and I think about which pages or articles on the site are working and which are failing. So here, you know, I guess like the main metrics I'm looking at are, you know, page views, and looking at the, you know, the underlying share of traffic, the source of that traffic. Is it coming from organic sources? Is it direct? Is it referral traffic? I'm looking at keywords and whether they've been, you're gaining new keywords over time or missing them. I'm looking at conversions as well. And I'm thinking kind of like from some kind of like heuristic measures, like we want growth over position. So it's more important a lot of the time to be growing than it necessarily is like the absolute position of where you are, you know, how many page views you're getting, because different spaces are going to have different, you know, different audience. You know, the total addressable market for your content could be drastically different to another company, you know, sitting next door. So the absolute position of where you are is less important than, you know, you're publishing stuff and you're growing over time. Another thing we always look for is high organic share of traffic, because we, for the most part, consider that that's how blogs grow. You know, they get more organic traffic over time. So in our benchmark report, we said that, you know, 60% organic traffic is about the average. And then, you know, these really high growing blogs have like 80% of their traffic coming from organic sources. Benchmarking, I think, is a really important thing. And I think we've got a link to our benchmark report in the deck, because you know, you do want to understand like where you fit. So you can like have an idea of like, is your growth good? Is it bad for your size? For sure. And then the other thing we're thinking about is like, do you have good conversion rates on some of this stuff? This goes back to like the point that Ryan was making. You can have all the traffic in the world, that if it's not really helping you get leads, if it's not really helping you get revenue, if it's not helping you hit those goals, then what's the point to that, really? So again, like this is where you get something at a very low level mapping to, you know, these higher kind of like strategic ideas and these higher goals of what you're doing. Some of the red flags we might look at here are, you know, whales stroke like skewed traffic distributions. So that's when basically 1 or 2 articles are driving pretty much, like maybe 90% of your traffic on the site. Sometimes that can be good in terms of, getting traffic in if you are moving them through the pipeline, getting them to other articles or getting them further down the funnel. But if that particular article is like super, top of the funnel, to the point that the search intent for it is not really mapped to what you want for your customers, then really you're just getting people coming to your site, reading it for no real good reason and moving away. And it's not really doing something for you.
Andrew, do you mind if I add a comment real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've seen this a lot, and I feel like it's a trap in other ways too, because not only is it not making it so a big article that's generating a lot of traffic, but that traffic isn't really useful or qualified in any way. What I found is that like not only is not helping you with your actual goals, but it can also hurt you in other ways, because I feel like a lot of customers will be very, very focused on maintaining that traffic and even improving it, to the detriment of like focusing on things that are actually going to move the needle on their goals. So it's a distraction really in a lot of ways. Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah, I really like that point. Yeah, so you want to be careful whenever, in fact, this literally happened to Animalz, in fact, where we had a whale article and then we had this whole conversation about, do we want to publish more stuff like this to get more traffic like that? And it was moving away from a content strategy that already worked for us. So you really have to think about these things quite closely. Spiky traffic, what I mean there is this idea that you get articles which generate a lot of traffic initially, but then see no growth over time. They're not optimized necessarily for search, or people aren't searching for these types of articles. So you might get traffic from your email list or from social or from some kind of like backlinks or referrals, but nothing in the long term. And doing that is the worst type of problem with content, where you're writing a lot of stuff, you're putting it out there, but you're never really compounding your blog over time, which it really comes through this kind of like organic growth. Keyword decline is another one to like a good proxy, obviously, for something that's going wrong. Ahrefs now has a nice way of looking historically over keywords, for like the last year or two. And you can, if you look at the trend for important keywords, you can easily see like if you're losing keywords to certain articles, you're going to see probably a drop in traffic as well. So, looking for those kind of like markers is important. And then finally, I've got here like no traffic, no leads, and no reason. And so next week, Mark and Cassie are talking about refreshing, which is one of the main like low lift ways of generating traffic. And one of the things we always talk about in audits is refreshing content. But something which is kind of like refresh's unloved cousin is this idea of pruning content, getting rid of stuff which is not working for you. So this is one of the actions you can take if an article has no traffic. So for us, when we think of no traffic, we might be thinking of like an absolute limit of, over the past year, it has generated less than 100 views or something like that, and no significant change in trend over that time as well. Or we might say it's in the top, in the bottom 10% of all of your content for total traffic. It's not generating leads either. There might be articles on your site which generate, only a dozen views, but if 6 of those end up being leads, then you definitely want to keep that article. And then no reason is this idea that this comes down to the idea of not just concentrating on the data, thinking about how your content fits within your company and what it's used for, because you might find there are articles on your site which your sales team use. They send people to because they answer a specific question for prospects, and they answer it really, really well. That article will have no traffic, and it will actually have no leads either necessarily, but it's still being used. And this comes back to like as Ryan and Whitney were talking about, like this gut check idea of like making sure before you prune content that you've taken into consideration all, like beyond just the SEO focus or beyond just the metrics, thought about it from the strategic point of view and thought about it how it fits within your company. But pruning does work. So, a while ago, we published a case study with QuickBooks where they had pruned, I think, 2,000 or so articles and saw a 44% jump in traffic. We did a content audit with a media company, and media companies have thousands of articles. We identified over 1,000 to prune, and that company saw a 12% organic traffic growth, which was like 200,000 extra users or something like that. It was a significant uptick for their readership, in part helped because we showed them which articles to prune. It's not something you necessarily take lightly, and it is something which works potentially better for larger blogs, but don't always think that all of your content has to sit on your blog forever. If it's not doing work for you, if it's not building that equity over time, think about just getting rid of it. And also think about maybe it just doesn't fit with the way that your company works anymore as well.
Just to add to that as well, we do often couch the value of pruning in terms of it being for big enterprise sites where maybe you want to free up crawl budget, or you want to focus the topical domain authority on one or two things. I think actually, even for smaller blogs, there is a benefit to doing it when you want to free up some headspace. It takes a lot of time and energy each month to evaluate every piece of content you've got, to give it the treatment and the attention it deserves. If you have a hunch that a blog post just isn't fulfilling the purpose it should be, or it doesn't align with the current brand messaging or your current objectives, I think that can still be a good reason, even with a smaller blog, to think about getting rid of content as well.
Yeah, excellent. So the other thing that I have to look at is some of the technical issues. So this is, getting close to the idea of an SEO audit, but, are there technical issues on your site which might be holding you back? Just for an example, recently did an audit with a company, and a bug on their site had meant that over 40% of their content was just empty. They were just generating pages with nothing on it. All these pages were indexed by Google, and suddenly Google goes to the site and sees half of it is just nothing, and that's obviously going to impact them. So just sometimes finding those kind of low lift wins, these easy things that might just be a bug on your site, they might be holding you back. Some of the things we go into are on-page SEO, right? Like titles and headers and meta descriptions, things which I think probably are slightly less important now, but still important. It is good to have keywords in titles and in headers and meta descriptions, and the fix for that is almost entirely better content prep. I know Gail recently published an article on our outline process, and the way we work at Animalz is this kind of thing is inbuilt into the way we start content anyway. It's inbuilt into the strategy beforehand as well. It's thinking again a few layers above just okay, I'm going to quickly write, make sure this keyword is in this header. Accessibility is something which is becoming more important as well. Things like image texts, color contrast on page, labels on forms. You see these issues time and time again because it's not something people take seriously, but it's going to be something which you have to take seriously, and it's something which you obviously should take seriously. Again, the fix for here is often, better content prep. If you've got an image that you're using, make sure you have some text associated with that image as well. Sometimes it is, you have to get your dev team involved to make sure that your blog is well formatted, or your forms are well formatted. Whitney's going to go into more this idea of like the operational level that you have to think about. Potentially you don't have those resources available to you. And this is how like all of this kind of wraps together so much. Core Web Vitals is something which is big in 2021. It's always talked about. I don't know if it's going to be a big thing, but it's in your Google Search Console now, and Google flags you for it for sure. Speed, interactivity, layout shifts. You can find all of this information in Lighthouse super easily, and in your Google Search Console to see what mistakes you're making. Another place is web page test. I find really helpful because it gives you a nice waterfall image of how long it's taking to load every single asset on a page. So here again, like maybe you need dev resources for it. I actually find that in a lot of cases, you can speed up your page just by optimizing your images better. Don't just take a 10 megabyte JPEG. If you're doing like a listicle of like 30 articles and each one has 30 things and each one has an image associated and each image is like 10 megabytes, your page is going to load super slowly. Just think about it from that perspective. Again, like this is content prep, but easy wins for sure. And then linking something which we think about quite a lot at Animalz. We think about it in terms of both, obviously like backlinks from outside, but also like internally, like what are the internal links within your blog or within your site? Where are you trying to move people to? And what signals are you giving search engines about what the rest of the content is on your site? So the way I do this personally is I use a Python script to do this. And I look at like the links within text on articles rather than within footers or headers or something like that, but wherever you naturally try to link people to, and output graphs like this one here. This is in our benchmark report. It's actually from AppQs, and the circles here are sized by how many links they have in, and each of those massive circles is basically a hub page for AppQs, somewhere where they want people to go to and then move them further in the blog from. And this helps readers, obviously, but it also helps Google because they can link all of this anchor text together to these within these kind of like hub and spokes. So you end up with, in AppQ's case, ranking really well for user onboarding. So again, like this comes back to what Whitney's just about to talk about, is the strategic level of how do you think about content at a high level, and then it kind of like maps to this lower level, like literally, to implement that strategy, you have to link article A to article B.
I think it was in our research where we analysed 150 million page views of data, and the median number of internal links between the articles on the blog was, I think, 0. Was that right, Andrew?
Yep.
Yeah, which obviously there's the SEO implication of that, but I think most harrowing is just the user experience implication. It's really hard to get one person to find a blog if they then have no next step, no easy way to engage with more content on your website. That is such a wasted opportunity. So evaluating that with a content audit and actually spending a decent amount of headspace and time mapping out your internal linking structure, that's probably one of the most powerful, advantageous things you can do as a content marketer.
Yep. So while you do want to spend time going through the technical items that could be holding you back, you also need to take a step back and consider all the different types of content at your disposal, and especially like what makes the most sense for meeting your goals. So as you'll see from this chart, some types of content are better for some goals than others. If you're looking to grow organic traffic, you're going to want to focus on, shocker, search optimized content. However, a lot of our customers come to us wanting to do big thinker pieces and then also expect those to rank in search results. And in our experience, thought leadership content and search optimized content, they don't always play well together. In some scenarios, you might use several different types of content. So say you don't necessarily care where your traffic is coming from. You're not married to the thought of organic traffic. You just want more of it. You might then leverage that search optimized content and thought leadership to bring all those folks in. So just know that each of these content types comes with their own advantages and disadvantages. So if your search optimized content is indeed ranking for keywords, you can easily compound your traffic. You just need to kind of keep an eye on how those rankings are going and then refresh that content over time. Thought leadership takes a little bit more elbow grease to get it out there because you can't really rely on keyword rankings at that point. But if you do take the time to distribute it intentionally on social through other influencers in your network, you can get a much more compelling argument in front of a much more targeted audience that way. So when you look at your audit and you think about auditing, remember it's not just about like looking at data. It's about choosing which levers to pull in which situation to get you closer to your goals. So for example, we worked with a learning platform company. They actually came to us for a technical audit specifically. They were having problems with their site and they wanted us to figure out what was going on and how to fix it. In addition to addressing the technical side, we took a look at the types of content they were producing, and we recommended that they take on a new hub and spoke approach. And since then, their organic has grown by 620%. So it's a great example of how you can get a lot more from your audit when you come at it from both the technical and the strategic perspectives. The operational part of your audit is taking a brutal look at whether you can execute on the content that you need. So for example, base level, do you have writers? Do you have videographers or video equipment if you're looking at doing video? Do you have a design team, or better yet, a design team with actual bandwidth to work on this stuff for you? Someone with SEO skills, people who can update your content management system, analytics tools, and then people who know how to use those analytics tools to actually track the performance of your content back to your goals. We did an audit for a customer who was adding a new blog to their website. And in doing the audit, we actually realized that they didn't have the in-house resources to support this new blog. Had we not discovered this, we would have delivered this really beautiful audit and it would have just sat there and gathered dust because they had no way of actually executing on any of the recommendations that we made. So as part of their audit, we actually helped them figure out exactly what they needed to build their own content team in-house. So we ran through where they should go to find talent, what skills they need. We helped them put together an editorial process, and we recommended tools that wouldn't just work for that process, but also worked well for their existing stack. The operational part of the audit is also about identifying like what untapped resources you have at your disposal. So for example, do you have an executive who's really interested in talking to your writers and doing some thought leadership content? Does your company have connections to other influencers in your space that can help you distribute this content? Basically, you're looking for anything that can give you leverage in the content that you create and also how you distribute it. So another example, we did an audit for a video marketing software company, and we discovered that video, of all things, performed really well with their target audience. Their video content actually had higher page views, lower bounce rate, and more time on site. And yet they had spent all this time like trying to write blog articles and doing other types of content when really all they needed to do was to tap into that medium that they were most comfortable with. So a good thing to keep in mind when you do your audit is that you're not just pointing out all the things that you're doing wrong, you're actually trying to find the things that are working really well for you so you can double down on them and then expand on their success.
I think, a piece of advice, for every content marketer listening would be, after this, go and talk to a salesperson in your company and just ask them, like what problems do prospects have? Like what do you find, comes up again and again and again? And then, that will generate so much content for you. Content that is like absolutely designed for your customers straight off. And this is something which, like just a lot of people miss, is just being able to use the resources within your company to find what you need to write about. The same goes like your customer success team. Like what are current customers coming to you with, what problems do they have? Can you head that off on your blog. That's not going to show up, that's not leads, maybe it's only a little bit of traffic, but it's revenue over time, right? It's retention, which is something which, again, like people don't necessarily think about on their blog, like making sure that people, you can use this for your current customers as well. So just like thinking through, going away, talking to people in your company, like at every single level, you're going to come away with a lot of different ideas and a way to, focus different types of strategy away from just like SEO focused stuff or whatever you like in the moment.
I think we've got one more slide, but I guess if there was probably one takeaway to take from this entire presentation, I think auditing generally gets a bit of a bad rep for a host of reasons, but it basically boils down to whoever is doing the audit focuses only on one of the 4 different levels we've talked about. So when I've done this auditing in the past, I've been very guilty as a content marketer of focusing myopically on the metrics that I'm most familiar with, which is the page level stuff. So obsessing over traffic, keyword rankings, and not looking at technical SEO, not looking at the kind of strategic big picture, and trying to bite off more than I could chew from an operational standpoint. And the same goes from an SEO audit as well. That focuses more so on the technical stuff, often at the expense of the page level insights, the operational, the strategy. So when it comes time for you to run an audit, the key takeaway here is to run through each of these 4 levels in a systematic way. They are all important, they are all different. And this operational one is one of the most important because it's very easy to get a spreadsheet of keywords to try and rank for, or pages that have rubbish load speeds. The hard part is then actually doing it. What is the plan for doing it? What educational resources do you need? What help do you need? And that is normally where an audit stops being useful and starts being an absolute headache. So running through each of these 4 in order, best thing you can do for a successful audit. So yeah, huge thanks to Andrew and Whitney for talking through how they think about audits. Very information dense presentation, I'm conscious of that. So we've left you with 3 useful resources, a bit of extra reading if you want to go into this a bit deeper. We recently published an article which was essentially a companion piece to this very deck. So it goes into how we think about this in more detail. There's some worked examples in there. It's a great counterpart to anyone that actually wants to start doing an audit. As we've talked through at different points here as well, it's really hard to know if you have an absolute number, whether it's good or bad. Is X amount of traffic good or bad? Well, it depends entirely on your business, your industry, your goals. So one very useful thing to do is try and find very relevant benchmarks. That was the entire impetus for us creating the Animalz benchmark report last year. We looked at data across all of our customers to try and find realistic benchmarks segmented by company size that you could go away and try and work towards. Most of the data, most of the stats out there are just no good for actually vetting and your performance. This is stuff that should be relevant, should give you something to aim for. And just lastly as well, as I mentioned before, we do this for companies as well. This is something you can totally do on your own. If you have questions about how to do it, we're happy to follow up via email. If you just like someone to do it for you, we can do that as well. So check out audits.animalz.co, new landing page up. Very happy to chat to you and talk through audits a little bit more. Awesome. I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much, Andrew and Whitney. We can do some Q&A. I'll kick things off with one question I wanted to ask the both of you. Is there a minimum threshold in terms of age or size for when an audit starts being a good thing to do?
I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily as focused on age or size as opposed to like a trigger, like an event, like a tactic. So if you're going to be, I think you should do it before you try to embark on any new content strategy for sure, because you need that foundational information in order to do a better strategy. Anytime you're going to do anything massive, a big change, whether that's like a pivot to a new audience or like you're launching a whole new content arm, that's in addition to what you currently have, like your website or blog. It's also good, like if another good trigger is basically like if you're noticing that what you're doing isn't working or not working fast enough. So I don't think it's necessarily like at all tied to age or size of company or how much content you have out there. But if you're going to do a big move, do an audit beforehand.
Yeah, from my perspective, like in terms of the data, then, in theory, like we want, some data to understand like how traffic is trending over times, how keyword is trending over times. So, like we might say, you want at least like a year's worth of data beforehand, and you like maybe been publishing consistently. But at the same time, because kind of like to what Whitney says, there's so many different permutations of when you might need an audit, that, you might start your blog and then, be publishing stuff and then very quickly pivot. And then maybe you need to rethink your content, and then you want to think about your content strategy. And because like we think about this like strategy led in particular, rather than like necessarily, data led or data focused, that kind of like, that issue like comes to the fore more, I think, than like necessarily like age or something like that. At the same time, like much older blogs with thousands of pages, sometimes you do just need to like say stop. Okay, like what is going on here? What could, especially like with something like pruning or refreshing, I just like want an idea of like what I can get rid of. If I've got like 2,000, 3,000 articles here, like just tell me, what isn't working, and I can just get on with it after that.
We've got a few questions about content pruning in particular, actually. Would be helpful just a bit more of like an overview. What exactly is content pruning? How is it different from editing or refreshing old content?
Sure, yeah. So content pruning is literally removing an article from your blog. It's saying, instead of I'm going to invest any more time or money, effort into this article, I'm just going to, take it away. I'm not going to think about it anymore. So if you have 1,000 articles or something on your blog, maybe you want to, the bottom 100 or something like that are no longer useful for you. So you just go into WordPress and remove them. And then ideally you want to redirect those pages somewhere. So part of the content pruning process might be that you redirect them to the blog homepage, or you redirect them to another piece of content that is tangential, and therefore like if there is some traffic there, like it's the traffic is going to go to that page instead, and that page is going to start ranking better. So there's kind of like this process about like not just like, okay, bam, like this week I'm just going to destroy 100 articles on my blog. It takes a little bit more thought to that, to make sure like it makes sense the way you're pruning things. But yeah, like the basic idea is like you're just getting rid of it. And kind of like, as you said like earlier on, like part of this is also just the mind space kind of argument, like just not having to think about that stuff anymore. And pruning comes up, to do with at this lower level of metrics based stuff, just is not generating traffic at all, but also comes up at this strategic level of this is not what we do anymore. We have changed the way we work, changed what we talk about, changed the way we talk to our customers, and therefore like sometimes people will refresh content in that respect and try and change it towards their new branding or their new messaging, but sometimes like it just doesn't work, and like it doesn't make sense to do that. It's better just to start new stuff. So that's a consideration as well. I think that once in a while, sitting down thinking about your articles from this perspective of, does it actually work for me? And if it doesn't, I will just get rid of it. I think it's a perfectly valid thing to do in content marketing.
A quick note on the redirecting. While it does, like if you do not have a relevant piece of content to what you just eliminated to redirect to, I guess it's okay to take it to the homepage, but think about it from a user experience. So if you have someone landing on this page and they're expecting to get some kind of information about this specific topic, it's much better to redirect them to a page that's related to that topic so they can still possibly get value as opposed to just landing on your homepage and being like, oh God, where do I go from here? So.
There's one question which maybe I can field. Somebody asked about a page which has links attached to it, but nothing else. Is that something that's a good candidate for getting rid of? Well, depends on the quality and caliber of the links, I suppose. Good links are very hard to come by from experience. A lot of content we create, which is great for ranking or is great for conversions, is not always great for building links. We quite often find you have to build content tailored specifically to linking, stuff that is very shareable, like index reports, data studies, stuff that people are incentivized to link to and share amongst themselves. Maybe have a look at that page in Hrefs or a similar backlink analysis tool. If it has a decent percentage of links, if any of them are good quality, they're not spammy or scraper links, I would totally keep them. Content that generates links but has no other benefit to it is still extremely valuable content for you. We kind of get a bit blindsided sometimes and think about content solely in terms of the direct conversions or the direct traffic it generates. But actually content that generates links will indirectly benefit the entire site, make it easier for other pages to rank for keywords, improve domain authority. So I'd probably be a little bit cautious there with that one. Links are pretty good stuff.
You could refresh that. That would be a great candidate for refresh, because then you could try to build up some of those search rankings that you're not currently getting, or providing more value to the audience within the content itself, linking it to maybe some of your other related content, or if it's more of like a middle bottom funnel piece, maybe directing it into product information so that people can convert. You already have the links, like leading folks there, and you're starting to build link equity that way. You might as well just double down with some of the other ways so that you can just improve it all across the board.
Yeah, refreshing is definitely, I say, preferable in lots of respects to pruning. And if you want to learn more about refreshing, then I would tune in for Cassie and Mark next week for their, they will go into it in depth and how exactly we think about it at Animalz. Because, like we even built a tool around this Revive, the idea of trying to find articles which used to have traffic and over time have declined and are great opportunities for refreshing. So yeah, there's a definite, just a great way of not expending a lot of time and effort and getting a lot of returns back from it.
We have a good few more questions, but I want to keep this nice and tight to an hour. So we will do our best to wade through all of these, share little video snippets with you on Twitter as well, so you'll still have these questions answered. Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. I will be following up with an email in the next couple of weeks with a recording of today with the slides. If you've got any questions about today, that's a great chance to reach out and talk to us. As Andrew said, we've got 2 more sessions in this series. So we've got content refreshing next week. And the week after, we are talking to the content leads at Buffer, Zapier, and Amplitude. We're going to be picking their brains about the 3 biggest problems they've encountered and solved when growing their blogs to the massive scale it's reached. So very excited about that. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, everyone. I'll let you get back to your day. Thanks for attending.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.